If you had to go back and start your podcast over again, what's something you would have done different? So what would you say to somebody that did start a podcast, maybe ran into that, I didn't bank my episodes? How did you get from New York down south? I mean, did The Bachelor take you, or did you work, or what was it?
Yes.
What are some of the things you tell yourself when you're going through some of those trials and storms?
Yes, it is good to be here.
The Jason Tartick. So we got connected through my buddy Jeremy. He does our hair, and he's like, you got to meet my buddy Jason. And I believe he maybe said the same thing to you.
Yep.
And I started going over there like 12 years ago. Melissa cut my hair, and she got so busy, and she like kind of pawned me off on this guy. And I was like, well, who's this guy that she's pawning me off on? She's like, well, Jeremy's my best. And so that's how we met. He introduced us.
And for anyone that doesn't know, Melissa's a big deal. She does Carrie Underwood's hair. So if you're getting your hair cut by Melissa, that's big time right there. And Jeremy's he's now the #2 guy. So that's a good head of hair you got there.
It is. I try not to say too much about Melissa because I was on this call one time, and a guy asked me when I was coaching him, and he goes, hey, I got to ask you a crazy question. Where do you get your hair cut? And I told him where I went, and I said, initially I went over there just because one of my mentors told me, he goes, you need to go somewhere expensive to get your hair cut. He goes, build some relationships over there. So I really just went to Melissa because she charged a lot, and they're like, that's the greatest flex I've ever seen.
Yeah,
you go to Carrie Underwood Stylist Salon, she's amazing.
She's great. And talk about business, you should have her on as a guest. I think what she has built is pretty impressive.
We're keeping her busy building her house right now, but when she's done with that, I plan on probably having her over here.
There you go.
That'd be awesome.
I love it.
So Trading Secrets,
Yep.
Your podcast, one of the first questions I wanted to ask you before I forget is if you had to go back and start your podcast over again, because you've been doing it for a while now and it's really grown and you've had some amazing guests on there, what's something you would have done different?
I would have. So what I did most of my businesses I operate on now are all self-funded, and I'm very focused on the P&L. So that is backwards to most businesses, right? Especially if you look at the tech boom. It was all about invest, future equity, PE ratios could be off the charts. Look at Amazon. They weren't profitable how many years, and we'll capture the market. Everything I own, I've been very focused on. We will be profitable. We'll be profitable in a very short period of time, and we're going to be self-funded. So one thing I would have maybe done differently is when you have that approach, it's a beautiful thing for comfort, security, cash flow, and cash position. It's not the best thing for expedited growth. I now have a team on Trading Secrets that's 10 people. When we started, I had 1, and I gave him a very slight sliver of equity, so I had no money on the table. I think if I had this team in place then when we started, the acceleration wouldn't have taken as long as it has. So that's probably something I would have done differently. One thing I've done consistently, which anyone out there, if you're starting a podcast, you have to do, you have to have concept, you have to have a ton of episodes banked, and you have to be consistent, because majority of podcasts, as you know, fail within 3 months, right? And only 5% of podcasts make it a year. So the idea of saying, hey, I'm going to build a plan and have everything in the bank ready to go, so I know I'm going to be in the top 5 percentile of just longevity of podcasts, was a big one too.
Ooh, that's solid. That's solid. So what would you say to somebody that did start a podcast, maybe ran into that, I didn't bank my episodes, and they want to get their feet back up underneath them? Should they just pause, start banking a bunch of episodes? Should they try to stay on that frequency and just work overtime and invest in it, and put the money down? What would you say to those people?
What I'd say is to those people, the best way to process these type of questions, or think about yourself as a consumer. Think about a show you love. Okay, I was on The Bachelor, so let's talk about The Bachelor. Imagine all of a sudden The Bachelor, who the audience is there every single week. They can't wait for Monday at 7 p.m. They get there and they got their roses and they're doing a big get together at home, and just the show's not there. What? We'd all be pissed.
Yeah.
And we'd be pissed because the show has trained us to be prepared. Monday night, 7 p.m. Central. This is what you're going to get, and we're going to tease the next episode, and you're going to talk all about it for the next 6 days. So as a consumer, we expect that. But then if we're bringing a product to life, we have to act on that. And so make a decision on 2 things. Either learn how to podcast by yourself so you don't need guests. Don't worry about being perfect. Just talking to a mic and get it out and be consistent. Or what I would say is do seasons. So if you're going to do, you got a crazy schedule, you can't podcast once or twice a week. It's impossible. You can't do all the pre-production, post-production. Do a season, 10 episodes, theme your season, and get 60 or 70% of it done before you even launch the season.
That's what Meltzer does.
Does he?
Yeah. Yeah,
Dave Meltzer?
Yeah, Meltzer.
Yeah, he's amazing. So, he's an incredible guy. He's been my mentor for a few years now. And that's, so if he's doing office hours, it's the same thing. If he's doing the 2-minute drill, it's the same thing. And we just go to Vegas, go to Blue Vine, and just record.
Yeah, he rips in
Or Blue Wire, yeah.
Blue Wire, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing, too, I think who does a really good job at this is Erica Nardini. Erica Nardini, CEO of Barstool. Obviously, her schedule's jammed. And her background, she was CMO of AOL. Like, she's a corporate soldier. She works her ass off. How can she do a podcast? She does a podcast by just recording what she does every day. So when she's doing a one-on-one with her employees, guys, get the mics. There's our podcast.
Gary Vee.
Right?
Gary Vee experience.
Gary Vee's this. I had Gary Vee on my a podcast of mine to watch what he did with the content we created for him. He took the podcast I had. He made a podcast himself. The video we gave him, they're like, no, we want the full video. He cut about 40 different cuts from that. My ass wasn't in one of them. It was just his quick clips of talking.
Yeah.
He got 50 pieces of content for being on my show.
Yeah.
That's
so, right? Yeah.
What do you think the cadence is, like a good cadence on a podcast, like ideal?
I think you should really start with 1 a week. I think 1 a week is great. I've seen a lot of people do 2 a week and they're successful. I've seen people do 3 a week and they're successful. I think even if you have some of the most loyal followers in the world, you go more than 3 a week, you're going to lose them. I think if you lose them, then it's tough for them to catch up. If it's tough for them to catch up, are you retaining them? So I think if you do 1 to 2 a week, you should be in a good place to do it.
That's really smart.
And there's so many different strategies too. Like when you're doing it, are you live on Facebook? Are you live on TikTok? Are you live on Instagram? Could you do a Patreon model where you're live for only people that want to be in it? Are you interacting with your clients live with Q&A? Like there's so many different tactics of how you bring it to life to build a community too.
Yeah. How'd you come up with the name Trade Secrets?
We sat back for a long time and just thought long and hard, because what's interesting is my demographic is like 80% female, 20% male. Of course, because most of my platform was sparked from being on a reality TV dating show. Since getting into more of the business stuff, that's rotated a little bit. But everything we say is like, this isn't about us. It's not about our ego. It's about how are we serving the people we know will listen. And we needed something that wasn't too financy, that certainly wasn't too bro-y or too business acumen-y, but could touch a lot of things. Like the idea of a trading secret could be like, just like your life mission. It could be a trading secret of a pop culture show. It could be Shawn Kaplan telling me how to really strategize with, leveraging bank loans so that I could build equity. It's applicable to everything, but also kind of like a trading secret in the idea of trading also has a pretty cool meaning too. So that was a thought.
That's cool.
And a cool logo.
Yeah, there's a logo right there.
Yeah, we have to get one of those.
How did you get from New York down south? I mean, did The Bachelor take you, or did you work, or what was it?
Yeah, so my career track, born in Buffalo, New York, played soccer, hockey, lacrosse growing up, soccer in college. Geneseo, I know you're from Rochester. Let's go. Come on. Go Bills, go Sabres.
Let's go.
And then I was like the corporate soldier. Get me into the bank. I will work my ass off and I will work as hard as I can. I was the yes man. Tell me where to go, I'll go. The bank ended up moving me like 4 or 5 times, got a bunch of promotions. The largest move was from New York to Seattle. And in that role from New York to Seattle, I was in the corporate lending group. So companies that did 100 million to 1 billion, we did all the lending. So anything that from a debt perspective that touched their balance sheet, we were in charge of that. And if it was a syndication, either lead it or be part of it. So that was my life. And then I got my MBA at night too, did all the things. And I went against everything that any follow the path book would tell you. I went on The Bachelor, reality show. So I'm 29, senior vice president, kicking ass left and right in work. And then ABC calls me. And everyone in my life was like, dude, no. Like, what are you doing? You got a rocket ship on you're not a reality TV guy. Like, this isn't. Every person from best friends to family members were like, don't go. But I recognized in my 30 years, I felt like every decision I made, especially in my 20s, was for the model, was for the blueprint, was what everyone told me I had to do. And I started to burn out. And so I said, you know what, for me, I'm going to do it. And that's when I went on the show. As a result of being on the show, I went back to work for a year. And then this business became much larger than that business. From Seattle, I moved to Nashville because on a podcast, ironically enough, my ex-fiance interviewed me to say, okay, you were a banker, you went on The Bachelor, people really took on to you, we wanted you to be The Bachelor, you weren't The Bachelor, what's next for you? And ironically enough, I met her then and she became my fiance. So what was next was her, right? From that interview.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Nashville for her, and especially with my business becoming larger than the banking business, it's flexible to live wherever.
Yeah.
So moved here in Nashville 4.5 years ago. Things didn't work out with us, and as a result of that, still here in Nashville, Tennessee. So that's my story. Yeah,
Amazing.
Yeah.
Love Nashville. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's growing. It's like at a very fast speed. And I think business perspective, you look at some of these, what you might call as like progressive cities and conservative states really have taken off in the last 3 years. I think Nashville's one of them.
Oh yeah.
I saw your post the other day, and I really liked it because I was feeling this thing about the New Year's where I was like, it's not the same New Year's resolutions, all of that, like that I've felt in the past. And I saw yours, and I was like, I relate to him, like that kind. And so, last year wasn't your best year overall, like, for a lot of people.
Yep.
And like, so take us just through that journey a little bit. We don't have to get into all those details, but I want to more so talk about like mindset and like, what are some of the things you tell yourself when you're going through some of those trials and storms? Because I think so many of our watchers, followers out there, what they're doing, they're just struggling right now.
Sure.
And those are the stories that are not being told, and people just kind of retract into the shadows. And, can you talk about that a little bit about last year?
Of course. Yeah. So in 2023, it started off, and, I think what's interesting is you look at your life in silos, maybe, of like your personal world, your professional world, your financial world, your social world, and they're independent of each other and there's no crossover. And I'm a firm believer that all of those things like synthesize to be your foundation. And while some of the things in my professional world were going really well, the personal world was not going well. And that hits the root of everything. It affects your happiness, your productivity, and all things. And so it was in summer of this year, that's when my ex and I broke up. And when you're dealing with, it's really tough for me when something like what was and what you expect to be what is no longer is, especially when what you thought what is was a lifetime, right?
Yeah.
So that just like totally rattled my foundation. What are some things I did to get back? I really focused on absolutely no finger pointing. There could have been a whole lot of finger pointing, but really thumb pointing, really understanding like what could I have done better? And through that, I've learned when conflict came my way, I think instead of stepping into those conflicts, I would run from them a little bit. And what all conflict is just like growth trying to happen. So when you're running from conflict, you're actually doing yourself a disservice. I think the whole idea of just like understanding what feelings mean, being able to communicate them, because the more effective you could be with that, you're actually showcasing vulnerability, and vulnerability creates connection, which makes a unit stronger. And just through the whole year, I learned a lot of things, and going through a public breakup is a whole nother storm. That's a whole nother animal. Yeah. I think the biggest consensus is in everyone's life, no matter how large it is, or it may seem, there's noise. You could have 3 friends, and there's still going to be a lot of noise that impact you. In my world, there's a lot of noise. And the thing is really just trying to like tell yourself like, no noise takes your character. Look within, know who you are, and trust who you are, and continue to pour into who you are. And the last thing I'll say as a takeaway is that's one thing I've done a poor job at in 2023 is so much self-sacrificing for others and other people's needs and wants. And as a result of that, not listening to me, to my body, to my mind, to my heart. These are the things I need. When I take care of myself, that's when I can go give back and give to others and do things. But I wasn't taking care of myself. In 2024, it's about that.
Wow,
that's beautiful.
That's really, really good. Man, I went through a season last year, and that like helps me so much just to hear that, because it tells me that where I was at and what I learned, I'm on the right trajectory. So I went through a similar thing where I put everybody else before myself for 40 plus years. I didn't have a dad growing up, so I was always looking for validation and affirmation from other people. And so last year I hit a wall. I had an addiction. I was working. I didn't feel like I knew what my identity was. I went through some big breakups with mentors. I changed companies. Wow. And I met a guy by the name of Cody Sperber, the clever investor. And shout out to Cody. He changed my life. But he's like, I don't know what you want to talk about today. He goes, but I want to share something with you, this decision that I made that changed my life. We can talk about money and real estate and all that stuff if you want. And he told me about how he went away to a 7-day intensive in Arizona.
Okay.
So I just asked tons and tons of questions about that, about trauma and, things that he's gone through. And he said, you cannot give away something that you do not own yourself. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he goes, well, there's circles. And he drew these circles out. And he's like, in the middle should be you. And what happens is everybody puts everybody else in that circle. And I did. If you wanted time with me, I'd schedule it. If you wanted me to drive across town, I would do it. And I never focused on myself. And I realized my tank was empty.
Yeah.
And so going through that journey, I went out to Arizona for 7 days, went through 90 hours of therapy.
Wow.
It was the best thing I ever did in my life. I learned why I make the decisions I made. And I'll tell you, Jason, like the world wants to tell us that putting ourselves first is narcissistic.
Yeah.
It's not right. No. A tree can't grow without the roots being firmly planted.
Right.
And I think there's so many people out there trying to do what they do, and their roots are just not firmly planted in who they are and their identity and feeling good about themselves. And, have you had those moments in your life where you were just like, you were confused on what your purpose was and what you had to offer, and you looked up and you didn't know what your identity was?
I mean, all the time. But I think one of the things you said about your story too that resonated with me is that everyone, whatever it is that they're doing, the behaviors that we're acting on today are really, as you probably learned through therapy, are really stemmed from how we protected ourselves as kids, like how we protected our securities and traumas we had, right? For me, I learned through therapy, as a kid, my safety net was people pleasing. My safety net was making people happy, right? So if people were happy and I was checking the boxes, then I was pleasing them. And if I pleased them, I was in a good place. I recognized those behaviors that I was doing, the same ones at 5 years old, 7 years old, 10 years old in high school. In 35, I'm doing the same shit.
Yeah, right.
I'm doing the same people-pleasing thing to protect me. So I think it only comes from self-exploration and to understand your roots to literally day one to where you are today, to then say, that's why I do that. I need to understand it and be aware of it and just start working on it. The identity thing is interesting because I wrote my first book was called The Restart Roadmap. And what happened, I was getting my MBA and I was a young kid in a high level role, getting paid well. So my identity only became my job and it only became my title. I started acting like my job. I started talking like my job, everything.
Yeah.
Lost myself.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of a meeting and it's a huge pitch. CEO, CFO, everyone's there. I'm the youngest guy in the room by a mile. And right when it starts, I was like, everyone looked, I was like, can I go to the bathroom? And you're like, sure, it's down the hallway. I dart out of there.
Well.
By the way, as we know, that is the last thing in a pitch. Like, and that is like number one. Like, you keep your composure, you keep your cool, you got it now. I get in the bathroom, boom, I hit the floor, I passed out.
Whoa.
Totally had a full panic attack.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was just diving and exploring. I'm like, what is going on? I think I had lost so much of who I was through the identity of my job that I was putting all this pressure on me to be what everyone else needed me to be, right? I needed to be this title. I needed to talk this way. I needed to act this way. I needed to dress this way. In the meeting, I needed to sit this way. And that wasn't me. Yeah. And I lost it so much that I had a panic attack in the meeting. And so I think the idea is if you let other people's labels or titles or things drive your identity, it's going to put a ceiling on what you can accomplish, and it's going to eventually put weight on you. And in some capacity, maybe not passing out on a bathroom floor, you're going to crack. You're going to crack.
It's true.
Ed Milet said this in our mastermind call a couple of weeks ago, and he's like, all the things that you're trying to do to impress others and be there are all the wrong people you're trying to impress.
Yes.
And I haven't really shared this story before, but there was a point probably about 2 years ago that I'd like to go for a drive on Sunday mornings. I'm a driver, and growing up, I never had cars, so I love cars. And so my dream car was to get an Audi R8 twin turbo V10. I bought one. It was gray, shark gray, black wheels. And I told my wife, I said, hey, I'm going to go out and, go on a cruise on Sunday morning. Got my cup of coffee, probably fired up a joint. I don't remember what it was. and because it was every day for 10 years. It was five to 10 times a day for 10 years. That was my addiction because I was just coping with the pain of my dad committing suicide and hurt and girls leaving me. And, getting fired from jobs. And so I'm driving down that road, and like I remember I looking at my knuckles, and they were white knuckling the steering wheel, and I didn't have a smile on my face. Sun was shining, it was beautiful, back roads of Tennessee. I'm cruising, got my coffee, feeling good.
Yeah.
And I'm literally like, why are you not joyful? What in the hell is wrong with you? Like, you have it, you did it. Like, and it was in that moment that I made a decision that a couple months later I sold that car, and everybody was like, why'd you sell the car? I was like, and I told everybody, I was like, well, I'll just put the money in the bank. I'm going to buy another one.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But I did it because I wanted to do something tough, and I wanted to face that, and I wanted to break it away. And what I take away from what you just said is, if you don't focus on really, truly what you want out of life and what brings you joy and what you have to offer, when you get to that point and you do have that stuff, it's not going to make you happy.
Yeah.
You're going to even be more empty.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pursuit of the thing that you think will fulfill you when you realize that it doesn't. It's the easiest thing, and I'm like obsessed with alliteration, as you know, but I look at these two variables of your life experiences and your expectations.
Yeah.
So if your experiences and your expectations match, that's what we call happiness. And when one doesn't meet the other, like when your blueprint of life of like, this is what I expect, doesn't meet the daily experience of how things are going, that's a shattering moment for a lot of people, right? Because you're confronted with what? Reality, the present. Anxious about the future, resentful about the past. So as soon as people get into that present moment, it's like you got to deal with like the monster that you've been running from. As Jordan Peterson talks about it, he's like, the concept is like there's this thing in your life, and it's like this tiny little like stuffed animal, and it turns into Godzilla. Because when you keep ignoring it, it just keeps feeding and feeding and feeding, and then you're trying to like deal with the mega boss, and you're realizing, man, I'm not equipped. And I think that's like the story of David and Goliath. It's showcasing the same concept of like, we can slay the giant in our life. We just have to have the courage to enter into that battle and go like, I'll take whatever I got. I'll sell the car. I'll do the thing. I'll resist the thing. I'll sell the house. I'll do whatever I have to do in order to get back into that place of where I have full control of my life, or where I'm in the driver's seat and in pursuit of the things that I want to achieve. And you know, I've hit many of those roads. And those fractures relationally certainly are extremely tough, as well as when it comes to expectations about what we want in life.
I think that there was a quote I recently just read that was about discipline. It said, discipline is the truest form of self-love. And like, if you think about that, some of these decisions you have to make, and are you going to make sacrifices or whatever, and how tough it could be. Like, when you're showing discipline in your life, you're really just showing yourself how much you love yourself. When you decide not to have that drink, or when you decide to stay in and get a good night rest or prepare for the meeting, it's literally just showing love to yourself, discipline. Right?
And that self-sacrifice you traded for the self-love. Like, I can see that delineation.
100%. And you see how that mounts and can build into something that just becomes toxic. So that was like, that's the 2033, mission, learning lesson. And now you just got to move forward and grow, right?
Man. Absolutely.
A lot of action, that's for sure.
What is if somebody just said, what's the word hope mean to you? Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
I think about hope as like the desire, wish, and ideology of controllable and uncontrollable things, tangibles and intangibles, coming to a reality, right? Because when I think hope, sometimes it seems like a far-fetched idea that I don't have any control of. And when I think of hope, I think it's things that I've put so much work and time into, or I do have control of. So when I think about hope, I think it's like a synthesis of like all of those moving parts. But it's obviously, I think the end result of it is like the manifestation of a dream. Right?
Yeah. I think hope's best friend is faith. I think they hang out together. Right? Hebrews 11 was my favorite verse, and it's confidence in things you can see and the things you cannot see. And that's always gotten me through life. And it's some of the worst shit that we've ever been through in our life that like we look back at, we're like, man, that was awful, but I wouldn't change that. Like, you probably wouldn't change anything about 2023. Look where you're at now and where you're going, your trajectory. And so this Hope Dealer podcast, as we're growing it, like, we just simply want to encourage others that are going through a storm or have faced a storm to hear that other people also went through it and look what came out of it.
Totally.
Hope, faith, and love will really propel people through a lot in life.
And I think what's interesting, through my podcast, I've had the chance to interview billionaires and big celebrities and, athletes that are Hall of Famers in the respective sports, but, golf, NFL, NBA, MLB.
Just interviewed the girl from Barstool.
Just interviewed Alex Bennett.
Yeah.
But we've had, Gronk's been on the podcast. A-Rod just had Sergio Garcia, every shark from Shark Tank, every Real Housewife. Like, you name someone, like, that's how crazy the actress is. The point is like these people that have achieved outlying success.
Right.
And when people ask me for one common denominator, every single one of these people I've interviewed have hit rock bottom. I mean, just the one you said about Barstool.
Yeah.
She got fired. She got divorced to a billionaire who structured their prenup so that she had to pay him, and she was unemployed in New York City. And what'd she do? She just built a media company that's crushing it. She's now making more than she did before. She has a new boyfriend. Like, every one of these people have hit rock bottom, but they've lived in the emotion of rock bottom. They've lived in the pain of it. And as a result of it, have grown to use it as a massive trajectory forward.
That's good.
Right? Because we all go through it, all of us. Yeah. It's just, how are you going to use it as like a trampoline, or is it going to bury you?
That's the $1 billion answer right there. Like, if people want to know the secret, run towards the storm.
Yeah.
Buffaloes are my favorite. They're the buffalo and the cattle. We give out a buffalo award in here every month. And
that's cool.
It's like, run towards it.
Yep.
Everybody wants to go to the pinnacle and climb the mountain, but they don't understand, like, to do that, you have to have the valley. There would be no mountain without the valley.
No.
Victory's in the valley, baby.
No.
Right?
All
And
day.
how good does that victory feel when you've been through the shit?
Right.
And run it, but run in it.
And don't bitch and complain through it and kick and scream, because people are watching.
Yeah.
So we were
yeah.
building our house. I bought we built a farmhouse on 20 acres out in Nolensville, and it was like our dream.
Yeah.
But we sold our house really quick because that was when the market was crazy. We were in Mexico and got an offer on it, and we were like, I can't refuse it.
Take it, yeah.
And they were like, you could stay for 3 months. Well, I'm thinking 3 months, house will be done, right? Mm-hmm. Jason, 6 months later, after we sold the house, it still wasn't done. We moved into that RV with 2 kids and 2 dogs. And I remember coming home, and I was in a deep, dark place.
Yeah.
I think that's when my addiction really took off. And I'm like, am I seriously coming back to a campground in Antioch again every day? And I remember telling myself multiple times, I was like, people are watching, Shawn.
Yeah.
People are watching. Are you going to kick and scream and bitch and complain? Or are you going to go ahead and say, you know what? This is something good's going to come out of this. This is what's happening. And I documented it.
Yeah.
And it was a good season. I think if people would just say, like, sometimes when the devil tries to come at you, it's like, all right, devil, you want to fight? Let's go.
Let's go.
Instead of like, kicking rocks around.
Yeah, like, don't you think like almost like happiness or determination, like all these things I think are like mental choices.
Right.
Like everyone, I am sure if I asked you and you for a list of like things that have gone wrong in your life, we can all have like extensive lists if we dive into it, and all at different levels, of course. But everyone's gone through shit. And I think that's where like a lot of this becomes a choice. Happiness becomes a choice. Being grateful becomes a choice. Optimism becomes a choice. And it's so easy to take the other side, right? But when you take the right side, I just think it has such an impact on everything in your life.
Sure does.
Everything.
So back to some trading secrets.
Yeah.
And kind of merging this together, one thing I want to ask is, a lot of people are going through a dark time financially right now.
Yeah.
And we can like give them the top 5, have a budget, like, but if you were just like talking to a friend that was like, man, look, I can't get my legs up underneath me. I'm barely able to pay my bills right now. What are some things you would tell some folks out there right now that need a little hope and a little guidance through that financially?
Yeah, I think, again, this is like a question we could do a full episode on, so I'll try and be like as succinct as possible. I think when you think of finances, the 2 big things you got to think about when we're talking technically are just cash inflow and outflow, right? What you can control. So if you're going through a tough time financially, I think right now, just take a step back and look at history. Look at where cash was going out. Through that history, you could also do more self-assessment on the psychology of yourself. So where money was being spent where it didn't have to be, why was it spent there? Was it impulse? Was it something else? One thing I did when I went through a financial tough time, I started tracking my past 6 months of receipts, and I noticed my bar bills were out of control. Now, why were my bar bills out of control? More self-reflection. No, I wasn't drinking that much. It was impossible. What was I trying to do? I was trying to be the guy.
Pick up everybody
Put my
else's.
bar down, come to me, I'm the man. If I'm doing that, what are some of my issues? There's obviously a ton of insecurities. There's a ton of like things that I need to work on. It's wild how when you look at the psychology of yourself, you could actually see how it's reflecting in your finances. So that's cash outflow. Really analyze the cash outflow. Cash inflow, of course, is what are you doing to bring more money in the door? I think a lot of people struggle because they're in the wrong place, doing the wrong thing. As a result of that, their careers are not moving in any type of speed forward. The easiest thing to do, like the most 101, you don't even have to be able to spell business or career. In my opinion, is just say, pay attention to the things you naturally gravitate towards. What are the things you're drinking? What are you watching on TV? What brands are you wearing? What foods are you eating? You know, what car are you driving? These are decisions that you're instinctively making without even making them. Behind all of these things, and that clearly you have some type of interest, some type of desire, passion, hopefully for things you consume. Behind it, there are massive, massive multi-billion-dollar companies. And so I think if you feel stuck in your career, which is dictating your cash inflow, start looking at all the things that you just naturally are spending your time and resources on, and maybe find a career within those spaces or a side hustle, and you'll see how much faster you're going to expedite the process of increased cash inflow. And I think that's an exercise. You can have an MBA, or you could literally have fallen out, dropped out of high school. Those are things you could do. Look at the tag on your shirt and look at where your eyes are watching TV and why. And there's multi-billion-dollar businesses behind all those things.
That's really
Dude, you could save marriages with the cash outflow conversation and getting people to study the psychology behind what they're doing.
Yes.
Because I was just following that trend in my mind. And I'm going, like, in my head, like, I don't really spend a lot of money on myself household-wise. Like, with business stuff, there's things that have to happen. But then I go to, like, okay, so, like, if Amazon's out of control, what's fueling that?
Sure.
And then you go like, well, what's the behavior behind that? And what's the emotion behind it?
Yeah.
And what is the result? Is it guilt? Yeah. Is it shame? Is it excitement?
Addiction?
Is it addiction?
Pleasure.
What's driving that?
Yeah.
And I think it's a tough conversation for a lot of people to have, because it's kind of like we talked earlier about, like, facing the storm, looking the thing in the eyes and going like, let's deal with this. And I think that a lot of people the physiology, just like the stress response, I don't want to get in trouble, like all the triggers, dude, like I think it's super foundational to so many people of like what that conversation looks like, especially when you're going through hardship.
Yeah, for
As
sure.
an entrepreneur, extremely high highs, extremely low lows. Like I've experienced it all. And that's what's interesting is like studying that in the high season and the low season. And there's a ton of psychology around like how that functions. They did a study with, people who made a ton of money in like, it's basically in a third world country, and they only get paid once a year off a harvest. So they studied like the neurology and also the physiology of those individuals when they just were like a month out from making the next check, but they were like literally, we got to survive this last month. Then they took a housewife from New Jersey and they did a test on her when her husband lost her job and followed what was happening.
Yeah.
And their cognitive function dropped by over 20%, which was equivalent to losing an entire night's sleep. So what ends up happening is people are in that fight or flight, and they're in that like expression mode if they're going through a challenging season financially.
Yeah.
And it's actually like they're trying to get up the next day and go battle the day, and they didn't sleep.
Yeah.
The cognitive function, the how they solve problems, how they make decisions, because all that is, in my opinion, it's bottom up. So it's not coming from the stress of the mind and then affecting your body. It's the trauma that's stored in your body that's like plaguing your mind.
Sure.
And you've got to get that readjusted. And I think there is really good ways to talk through those things to get people into the conversation and go, hey, this is creating a safe place for this conversation, and we're going to address this, and we're on the same team. I mean, you think about finances being the biggest challenge in marriages. I mean, it's like, that's not when it's good.
That's when it's bad. My second book, it's open for pre-sale right now on Amazon. It's called Talk Money to Me, and the whole idea is financial transparency. With what you just said, and with what you just said, and what I've said, there's one theme amongst everything here, and it's step into taking accountability. It is so hard to take accountability.
It really is.
It is so easy to make excuses and point the finger. But even understanding your psychology of what you're spending, or understanding the traumas that you've gone through and how it's impacting your cognitive thinking, which is impacting your finances, or the idea between Talk Money to Me, which is financial transparency, it's just stop pushing and take accountability. The whole book, Love Money, Talk Money to Me, is there's 8 numbers that you need to know about your finances, and you should talk about with your partner about their financial situation and different strategies of how to make those better as a cohesive unit. The problem is we want our finances to be better. Back to your question. We don't even know shit about our finances.
Right.
Like how many people out there right now can tell me exactly what's on your credit report? Have you checked in the last 3 months? Is there anything that shouldn't be there? What's your credit score? How much debt do you have? Where are your bank accounts? How many bank accounts do you have? You know, all these things. What was your budget? How much you spent? No one knows. Like do some self-assessment, because how do you fix something if you don't know the tangible numbers behind it?
And why don't they know?
I think it comes down to people, especially in the United States, have a huge issue with taking accountability. And the problem is so many infrastructures are set up so that if you don't take accountability, we will hold you accountable. You speed down the highway, you're going to get
We'll do
a
it
ticket.
for you.
What's interesting is with finances, because of the ability of profit, because of the structure with profitability, it's one of the few things that if you do not take accountability, larger companies will profit off you, and they won't even hold you accountable.
Right.
Don't pay your credit card.
They'll bait you into it even more.
That's fine. We'll just keep charging interest. We'll keep charging interest. And then you never pay your credit card, so your credit card's shot because no one was like, you have to pay, otherwise you're going to jail, whatever it is. Well, then they'll take a write-off. They'll get a dollar amount larger than they expected. Then there's another company that's going to get you. Like, it's interesting with finance that accountability is very vague. And I think as consumers, we suck at accountability.
And accountability, the line underneath that is likely tied to personal responsibility.
I would say under accountability, personal responsibility, which I would tie to is education, right? Like I don't think that our system is set up to teach the people the things they need to know about finances. Like in your K through 12, did you have finance class? Right?
No, there was a personal accounting class, and I remember.
That's good.
Yeah. Like,
we didn't have that.
Personal finance, there was one, and I think I was really lucky in where I went to school, and I remember I aced it, but it was so basic.
Yeah.
But it was some type of foundation. But I remember taking out college loans. I graduated in 2005, so like taking out college loans, then you're paying like 11, 12%. Thankfully, I had a great career, and I was able to pay all those off in a month. But without that, I mean, I would still be battling that today, and I didn't know any different. And my parents were like, listen, it's up to you. If you want to go do that, that's up to you. You're paying your own way through school and whatever. And I ended up, going to college, found out twice, and had to come to terms. Like I have met the challenges and faced them head on in my life.
Yeah.
And then said, how can I do this better?
Right.
And go back to school. When I was like 26, I ended up graduating and got a 3.8. But like, that's what life will teach you. And that's personal accountability and personal responsibility. If you want to do better, then you've got to be better. You've got to make better choices.
For sure.
And I think, it just becomes a very challenging conversation with people because I think it's like you're facing that thing and then going like, holy cow, I don't even know how we got here. So like the unraveling with two people who are emotionally triggered and who may be experiencing a certain level of uncertainty.
Yeah.
It's how do we gain certainty through personal responsibility? How do we do that? By just admitting, even if I'm 5% wrong, there's something that I can learn.
Exactly. And then usually with these approaches with finances, it becomes so reactive. It gets so bad that we have to react. We don't have any proactiveness. And I don't think the proactiveness stems from also education. So
yeah, dude, that's
we got to know this
stuff.
Be
sick. Like everybody needs to know about it.
We should do
I'm
something.
excited
If you
for
guys
this.
drop a comment below, we'll give away a couple of copies of his book.
Yeah, maybe
cool.
get them signed, send them out.
Yeah, let's do it.
That'd be
I
cool.
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank
it'd
you
be
guys
killer.
for supporting that.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you coming out here, coming out to Cool Springs, sitting down with us, chatting with us.
Heck of a place you got here. This is awesome. I'm coming back.
Yeah, I love
Hope
it,
Dealer
bro.
Studios. So we'd love to have you back. And we know your time's valuable, but we really appreciate you being here. And so how can everybody find you? We'll put your tags below.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Congrats on everything you guys are doing. Congrats on all your social media success. Keep pounding away. You could find me. The podcast is Trading Secrets Podcast. All my social media handles are Jason_Tartick. We have a talent management company I run. It's called Rewired Talent. You can find that. And then the new book is Talk Money to Me. You can buy it on Amazon right now. So that's about it all.
Out already.
Yeah.
Snag it.
Let's
today.
go. Grab a coffee.
Good.
That's it, folks. So we appreciate you tuning in. I'm Shawn.
I'm Nick.
And we are the Hope Dealers. Take care. Thanks, Jason.